Very kind of you to say that, because in many ways, I don't think it's controversial. I mean, when you're turning around and going, endless war rage, money was manipulated until it meant nothing. I think that's a truth. So that truth is something that people then don't want to hear. I mean, you are aware of the phrase, the military-industrial complex. We look at when Eisenhower then gave a warning as he was leaving the presidency because JFK had won. And then he makes his very famous speech when he's warning about the military industrial complex. What's very interesting, and is very relevant now, is that he left out one word. He was told to leave out one word, which was the military industrial congressional complex. And he is then making a link to Congress, to the political system, and how people benefit out of deals and how they benefit out of making money out of weapons, military, etc., etc. E.g., endless wars range, how we have wars, how we start wars. It's a huge subject, but it's very, very important, and it's very, very important now. And the reason why in between lambs and lions, you've got this thing where the Constitution has been suspended. There's complete, utter power abuse by the executive office, which is the President of the United States. And I would then say that is what is happening now. And the whole parallel there of Jan 6, which I've had the privilege with a very close friend of mine, David Summerall from StopHate.com, to then be supporting that. And there's a book that's out called The American Gulag Chronicles, which is to raise money for the prisoners, for people that have been arrested, for standing on the grass or for being there at January 6th to quite rightly under the Constitution to then go and exercise their constitutional rights. And as we now know, I'll just say, we segue slightly into this, as we know, because Between Lambs and Lions is in many ways was like a precursor of certain things that unfolded. But on January the 6th, the police started the violence. That's come out. Tucker Carlson talks about that. My dear friend David has been on Tucker Carlson talking about that. There's 3 documentaries that he's made. The last documentary that was released a few weeks ago, it then went to 2 million hits and then is shadow banned. So in other words, and we only have to, if people watch the World Economic Forum, if they watch Davos, this is not conspiracy. This is not out there. It's all on the internet. But it's then joining the dots up. There are a group of people that do not have our best interests in mind, and they have a hidden agenda and a genocidal agenda. Well, we used to say it's hidden. It's now blatant. So my film was, I didn't realize that at the time, but was alluding to certain things that were coming down the pipe, because in the film, you've then got, I'll give you another example, Craig. If you take Ron Paul, who was a big political figure in America, who then ran for the presidency, and there he is, he's running for the presidency, and then you've got people making comments from a news point of view going, and Ron Paul was what he's running fourth. Actually, he was third, and if not, in certain places, second. What I'm trying to illustrate is the manipulation of words and the manipulation of the media to then get what they want. So if you take the reason why, sorry, we've segued into I think a very, very important subject, because in many ways, if I'm allowed to say that, and David, if you're listening, that's one of the reasons that eventually, one of the reasons I made it. It's joining those dots up, like as a warning. So Jan 6 was about people going along to exercise their constitutional rights, because as far as I'm concerned, there was fraudulent within the votes, and it was stolen. That's it. Then when you then create what's called a Fed insurrection, you've got the FBI there, etc. Leading the charge to manipulate events. And now, as I mean, there were 5 deaths that day. People took a while to realize this. So Ashley Babbitt, Benjamin Greason, Kevin Phillips, Roseanne Boylan, and the 5th was a police officer called Officer Signick. And he, if you take his death, he died because he was suffering, I think, from a heart problem, something had come up. He was then taken by patriots to the police lines to say, could you look after him? You could then argue, I mean, someone from the patriot side, from the people there in Jan 6, said, well, I have medical experience. Can I give medical aid, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, we're sorting him out. Officer Signick then died. He died, and then in the press, it's, he was killed by being hit with a fire extinguisher by a bunch of patriots that were there on Jan 6. That was a lie, a total lie. And sadly, he died, but they used his death, this whole thing of building this case for this insurrection, saying it's the worst thing since, look at Pearl Harbor, 9/11. I mean, it came out of Kamala Harris's mouth. Now, as it's there, the whole thing was a complete setup because the people were there to turn around and say, constitutionally, we are questioning the votes. We're questioning in regard to the Electoral College, and they should all go back to the states and recount those votes. Now, when you go back to media manipulation, Fox News, as much as people might think, it's very interesting because as well as I do, we sit within a paradigm of left wing and right wing, where we could definitely say within the American system, and I think over here, we have a uniparty. We have a uniparty. So for argument's sake, in regard to Brexit, when you have got the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Scots Nats, the Welsh Nats, the parties in, Sinn Féin, etc., all saying that we need to stay within the EU. I said it publicly. I then think I'm living in a communist state. What is the difference between all these parties? So the same within America. So Fox News called Arizona for Biden. Remember, of course, America has far more time zones than we do. So if a news channel calls a state on the West Coast before the East Coast doors have been locked for them to still be able to vote, if there was an hour or so, then by creating that, what would happen is that you then put off people from going to actually vote. And they think, oh, well, we've lost this. When you see the fact that, and that they have done this for years. I mean, in 2016, whatever people think of Trump, right, that's still open, whatever people think of him, the fact is that what he said he would do, he then worked on enacting. And no, he's not a politician. And just because he sends 1 or 2 tweets that are offensive, because he is not as silver-tongued as Obama. And Obama is another interesting question. Because he then, Trump was doing that. The votes, they were stolen. The Democrats have a history of stuffing the votes. And as you know, with COVID, with the shutdown, it was then an opportunity to go, right, we can do ballot harvesting. We're going to leave boxes on the street. We can stuff them with votes. So when you then have a history of using electronic means to count votes as well, as Stalin said, it's not who votes that's important, it's who counts the votes. And that is an issue. Postal voting is an issue. Personally, it should be a handwritten ballot on the day you go in and vote. And of course, over here, people might turn around and say, yeah, but old people can't get out and all the rest. I hear that. There's a way around that. But postal voting is abused in this country and is abused elsewhere. So within America, in 2006, a very interesting lady that I've had the privilege to interview called Vicky Karp edited a book called Hacked. And it goes in about the Diebold voting machines that were pre-Dominion voting machines. And it talks about how you can hack these machines. So in other words, you would put your vote in, and there is YouTube links of this. You would put your vote in and go, I am voting Republican, for argument's sake, and then it comes out Democrat. It's not, this was filmed in doing this. So this abuse has been there for a long, long time. But well before that, even in the 60s, of how, the accusation is that Lyndon B. Johnson in 1954 in Texas, where he's becoming a senator, there is huge fraud within that. So we're going back a heck of a long time. And in fact, we could even go back to the Civil War, go back to Abraham Lincoln, wanting to get rid of him as president. You've then got people gathering together to buy votes. So there is a long, long history. And there's a very interesting man called Alexander Boot who wrote a book called, Democracy, a Neocon. It's a neocon trick. It's a con trick. And of course, without us going down any controversial road, Craig, what, me? No, of course I wouldn't do that. The whole situation, and I know we're going all over the place, so thank you for that. But the whole thing of what's happened with the dreadful situation with the post office, the Horizon software, or the Horizon thing, and Fujitsu and all the rest, and that these poor people were accused of stealing, which they weren't doing. And eventually all this has come out. And now we know that politicians knew, and et cetera, whether anything is going to be done or we're going to hold these people to account is another issue. But it's this whole thing of electronic. And then Fujitsu has a lot of government contracts. We have to go down the line to look at, we have e-voting for councils. We have that in Scotland, e.g. in regard to calculating the votes. Those issues have to be looked at, where any electronic voting around the world has to be looked at. I think in 2014, I hope I've got this right, I think in Latvia, the whole thing was electronic. In the Philippines, I believe in 2016, there were questions there that were verbally said. And it's not conspiracy. It is not conspiracy at all. You want to be able to go into the voting booth with a piece of paper and write that and say, that's it. And anything electronic can be abused. And that is what was going on in 2020 in regard to the presidential election.
I think, from one personal point of view, I think the most basic form of polling is you take a piece of paper, you put it in a box and someone counts it. And as you said, it's not important who you vote for, it's who's counting the vote that dictates. And even in its more barbaric form of a piece of paper, a pencil, and a box, it is open to abuse.
Yes.
And you've just got to hope that the society that you're part of is trustworthy enough that that abuse is minimal. But when you make it electronic, it's making it less obvious who perpetrated the crime, as it were. So it's far easier to click a button on the other side of the world or the other side of the planet nowadays, probably from an iPhone, to control any other electronic device that's connected to the internet, if you know how. That's far easier and less chance of being pointed out than somebody sitting at the Scottish Exhibition Centre pulling out a bag of, votes for whatever party that, is conspiring to defraud an election. That's far more difficult and far less likely I would suggest, in in Western European countries like we are. But to hit a button in a computer totally anonymously is far easier to do and far more likely. And you would think that with the horrific situation with the rising post office debacle, surely as a society we see that, and surely we can say, oh, hold on a minute. We can't just say, well, it's all right because we've paid these people, compensation, which is due. Some of them will never be enough. Some of them have, jumped off bridges and things because of situations around. But we can't just say, it'll be all right now because we've sorted that, or it's all right now because that was the Philippines, or it's all right because that was Latvia. And in a modern society as well, in the westernised society, we've got to be above reproach. And if having electronic means for voting or counting votes gives you a 1% chance of people pointing the finger, then surely you should be able to reject these notions. I mean, that's sensible, is it not?
It is extremely sensible, but you're relying on people being honest.
Mm-hmm.
You're relying on people not having an ideology to undermine that, and not to have an ideology where they believe in progressive collectivism and they believe in creating a one world government, because that's the truth of it.
And I think you made a point in Every Day's a School Day, and when you said the word conspiracy came about the JFK murder, and it's clever because there's certain words nowadays that you can just say, and they're what I would call argument-ending words. You say fascist, you say right-wing, you say racist, you say conspiracy, you say, all these things, and they become argument-ending. Yeah. That's it. Once somebody's pointed that at you, you have no right in society to retort. That's it. Game's over.
Absolutely.
So and I was actually considering this the other week there. I thought, what did that? And I think I said to you in the phone call we had the other night, a conspiracy is only a conspiracy until it becomes the truth. Now that, therefore, by pure default, means it was the truth all along, because it doesn't just become the truth; it was the truth.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and that is why what you are, I think, helping to lead the charge on, and with others as well, is trying to expose that. You're saying, well, this politician said this at the time, and now, because of like the COVID inquiry, we're now discovering that they decide not to keep certain digital data or wipe it off their phones or whatever. But you're relying on people's honesty. You're relying on people to have the same approach to honesty that you do. That the fact is, and you raise that, and you're absolutely right, because that's why we have to get rid of everything get rid of it electronically. It is abused, and we've got to investigate that. But I come to it. You're relying on other people's honesty, where if we see that people come into politics, what you and I were saying this the other night, what have they actually done before in life? What proper job have they done? Have they actually struggled? Now, I may not agree politically with a lot of stuff that Dennis Skinner says as the beast of Bolsover sitting on the Labour Party benches, but I respected him, and the reason I respected him is because at one point he was a coal miner. Lee Anderson, who sits on the Conservative side, amazing guy, coal miner, got into politics, rejected Labour, got into politics because he wanted to really make things happen for his community and where he is genuinely. Very interesting, because when Trump won, one politician in London, in Westminster, from Wales, I can't think of his name right now, said that Trump may go down as the only politician in history that will actually do what he says. And it's a bit like that phrase, it's what it says on the tin.